What is this? This is one of the world's good breeders of recessive pieds.
Yeah.
That's the world's strongest man, G.F. Capes. He was the world's strongest man for many, many years. He's a big guy. I've been standing next to him. I'm a tiny little fella. And I'm not tiny. He's really a big guy. But he's also a recessive pied breeder. And he's been doing a lot of good. And he's always promoting the recessive pied in, mostly in England, of course. But also he's often been abroad to entertain about recessive pieds. He knows a lot about them. This is seen from my point of view, nice. The quality is not up to today's standard, but the coloration of the bird is nice. This is the point giving that might not be so interesting. You can see that on the WBO homepage. There's a list of all the points that shall be given to each different variety.
In which you have maximum marking? The first one? The
first one, the A set.
Yeah.
That's the German club, and I brought that because, as I told you, the German club has a different description of the bird than almost the rest of the world. The funny thing is they have two clubs in Germany, the DVV, and they have one called DSV. And the DSV club, they adhere to the WBO rules.
Standards. Both have different standards.
Sorry?
Both clubs have different standards.
The DSV,
yeah,
they're using the WBO rules. Yeah. So the other one, that's before they were members of the WBO, they had this set, exactly. And they still have it to a degree. They have modified it a little bit. Here, there's a front picture of one of the old magazines, Budgerigar World. And also here, even though it's a front paper bird,
not a good bird.
It's a nice Budgerigar. It's many years old, this magazine, but it's got fleck. Yeah. And it's like we have accepted that the recessive pieds should have fleck. But we have the same descriptions for all varieties of Budgerigars. A clear white or yellow, depending on the color of the bird. Green. So this is something we should have in mind, at least for the future, that the birds we're breeding should be clear white or clear yellow, and make them bright if possible. This is a nice one. It is a little bit dark on his wings, but his head is clear. Yes. And that's nice. And this is a tiny little bird, but he's beautiful. One of the things that I think most of us like a lot is a small undulation it's small patches of undulation, but it looks very attractive on the birds. This is a very old picture of a Danish pied. That's also even says Danish, or there's another word for them called harlequin.
Harlequin.
Yeah, harlequin was used. It's not so much. Not much used anymore, but it was used before. But the real name was Danish pied, and then they changed it. And this is what you get from the BS when you see when you become a member of the BS club. You get some pictures of the bird varieties, and this is a page where the different varieties are, and those pieds are beautiful. One of them, that's nothing to do, that's a banded Australian pied. That's the way they did look, but they definitely doesn't look that way either. And the last one here, this one, it's a what?
Frosted pied.
No,
Clear pied.
It's a Dutch pied.
Dutch pied.
At that time. Now we call them continental pied or dominant pied. But at that time, when they came to world, they had light flight. You can see the flights are white, but you seldom see that nowadays. You can see them with some bright flights, but they almost always have one or two black flights as well. So we've been able to ruin a lot of things. And this is a sketch over the different types of pies. You won't be able to see it down there, but before we always mentioned the different varieties, but there's been more. There was also something named the Finnish pie, which is rubbish. Because what happened is that the Danish director of the zoological garden in Copenhagen, he became the director of the zoological garden in Finland, and he brought his Danish pies to Finland. So suddenly they were Finnish pies. That's the way it goes. And another figure of how they should look. A bright, it's a beautiful bird. Another example.
What do you call this?
A yellow face, sky blue.
It's the real bird or?
No, it's sketches. It's much easier to make a nice bird when you draw it than to make it yourself. This is a bird. It's a couple of years ago. I think it's 2 years old, this picture. It's seen from a Botterigar perspective, a very good Botterigar. Except a lot of flecking. Always you see this flecking. It's a pity. And the difficulties for judges that you often have one of these birds and one that doesn't have flecking but is a much lesser bird. So what to choose? And we haven't got, and here's it's even a even better bird, but
again with
it's almost spots in the top of the head, and it's a pity, but it's a beautiful or a good bird. That's the way it should look. A little bit flecked, but bright. It's got some flecking. An old picture again. Don't need to see that if we want to. Greatest problems, I can read some of them up. Yeah. Primary wing flights not white, but more in the direction of a grayish dirty. Spots when they're not full colored, so they also look gray. Too heavily marked. Slurred markings. As I showed you, the markings should be distinctive. Small patches of markings, not like must be either white or black, not gray and fading, but sharply defined. Outcross birds heavy in melanin carries the main responsibility for this. I'm sure that there will be many breeders around the world who do not agree with me. That's the way it is. That was that. That was about the recessive pied. You might have some questions. The Danish pied, I would like to say. Any questions? Yeah?
Yeah. What is the method of reducing the melanin or flecking in the bird? For example, if these birds are heavy in size, but they do have flecking on their heads.
Yeah.
So how can we reduce or how can we remove the fault present in the line?
Yeah. It is always us who decides which bird we use to breeding.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the error is, when I point at you, I've always got 3 fingers pointing at myself. You have exhibited a bird with flecking, but there are 3 fingers pointing at myself. Do I breed the right birds as well?
Yeah.
So you have to select birds where you eliminate these faults, and it goes not only for recessive pies. You have to be tough. It's not always so easy if you have 28 birds and 14 cages, and then you might use them all. But sometimes it's better only to have 10 pairs and say, okay, these last can go, or they're better off in an aviary somewhere where people can enjoy them. Because you cannot easily get rid of it. You might pair them to a clear bird. You might be lucky in the first round, but then the second generation, the problem comes back. And
it's difficult to remove.
There was a British Botterigar writer called William Watmoth. He wrote one sentence that I think many Botterigar breeders doesn't use anymore. Ruthless elimination. And that doesn't mean you kill the bird, that means that you deselect it from your stud. Ruthless elimination, that's the best way to obtain what you want. But of course it's very difficult, because often those heavily flecked birds also the best from head and size, and so it is difficult to decide not to use it. But the end result is that you always have to deal with flecked birds. So I almost never ever use flecked birds in my bird room.
Okay.
Not depending on what variety at all. Out they go. But that's a tough decision to take, and you also have to be prepared to some situation where the quality is falling in your birdhouse for a little period. But you'll come back.